Maya didn't know the massive black dog shivering in the shelter cage was a king. All she knew was that something in those amber eyes made her chest ache in a way she hadn't felt since her brother died. The Greymont animal shelter smelled like wet fur and broken promises. Maya had been volunteering here for 3 years, long enough to know which dogs would get adopted and which ones wouldn't. The pretty ones went fast. The rest waited in their cages, hope dimming a little more each day, until there was no more room and no more time. Maya was mopping the intake area when she heard voices at the front desk. "Found him wandering the North Woods," a grizzled hunter's voice said, drumming against the counter. "No tags, no collar, except this weird metal thing we couldn't get off. Didn't seem aggressive, but he's massive. Figured you'd want to check for a microchip before we... well, you know." Maya's hands stilled on the mop handle. The North Woods. Nobody went to the North Woods. Not since the territories had been declared forbidden by the city council 15 years ago. Too many disappearances. Too many stories about things that walked on 2 legs one moment and 4 the next. 6 months ago, her brother Luca had been found at the edge of those woods, throat torn out. Officials called it a wolf attack, but the whispers said shifter. "We'll hold him the standard 2 weeks," Marla said with a sigh that had become too familiar. "After that, if nobody claims him..." She didn't finish. She didn't have to. Maya knew she shouldn't look. She had enough problems. Rent due in 3 days, a shift at the textile mill that barely covered food. The last thing she needed was another mouth to feed when she could barely manage herself. But her feet carried her to the intake kennels anyway, drawn by something she couldn't name. The dog sat in the far corner of the largest cage, utterly still. He was enormous, easily the size of a small bear, with fur the color of smoke and shadow that seemed to absorb light. Lean to the point of starvation, every rib visible, but the raw power in his frame was unmistakable, like he could still tear through the cage bars if he wanted to. But it was his eyes that stopped her cold. Amber. Bright as firelight, and looking directly at her with an intensity that stole the breath from her lungs. Not the vacant stare of an abandoned animal, but something deeper. Something that seemed to recognize her. "Hey there, big guy," Maya said softly, approaching the cage with slow, deliberate steps. The dog's ears pricked forward. Then he stood, rising with a fluid grace that seemed impossible for something his size, and walked to the bars separating them. Up close, she could see the metal collar around his neck. Strange symbols etched into tarnished silver, glowing faintly in the dim light. The shelter staff had already tried to remove it, Marla had mentioned in passing. Bolt cutters, saws, nothing worked. Maya crouched down, bringing herself to his eye level. "You've had a rough time, haven't you?" The dog made a sound, low and resonant, somewhere between a whine and something more complex, almost like speech. Her chest tightened. She thought about Luca, about how they'd grown up in the orphanage together after their parents died in the factory fire. How they'd promised to always take care of each other, to never let the other be alone. How she'd completely failed that promise when something with claws and teeth torn him apart. "I can't save everyone," she whispered, pressing her fingertips against the bars. "I couldn't even save the people who mattered." The dog shifted closer, pressed his nose against her fingers through the bars, and the touch sent a shock through her. Maya pulled her hand back, startled. The dog didn't retreat. His eyes were gentle, almost sympathetic, as if he understood her pain and wanted to ease it. Maya's throat tightened. She stepped back. "Sorry, I gotta finish my shift." As she turned to leave, she saw a shiver run through his entire body. Not from cold. His fur was thick enough to handle far worse than the shelter's climate. This was something else. It looked like the shiver of rejection. His ears drooped, and for a moment he looked less like a dangerous beast and more like something that had finally given up. Maya's heart clenched painfully in her chest. That night, lying in her cramped apartment above the tailor's shop, she couldn't stop replaying it. Those eyes, that strange moment of connection, the way he'd looked at her like he knew her pain. The next morning, she went back to the shelter before her shift at the mill. Marla raised an eyebrow when Maya asked about adoption fees. "For the big guy?" "Maya, I love your heart, but he's not a practical choice. You live in a tiny apartment. You work 12-hour shifts. And frankly, we don't know anything about his temperament. He could be dangerous." "Has he shown any aggression?" "Well, no, but then I want him." Marla studied her for a long moment. "This isn't about Luca, is it? Because saving a dog is not going to bring him back." Maya's jaw tightened. "I know that. I can't let another one die when I could have done something." "The adoption fee is 30 silver. Can you afford that?" She couldn't, but she nodded anyway. Marla sighed, then waved her hand dismissively. "It's okay. Consider it waived. Call it a volunteer discount." Her expression softened. "But Maya, if he becomes too much to handle, you bring him right back. No shame in it. Understood?" "Thanks, Marla." The dog, she decided to call him Beery because he was large as a bear and the name made her smile despite everything, walked calmly beside her through the city streets. No leash needed. He stayed at her left hip like he'd been trained for it, adjusting his pace to match hers, alert but not aggressive. People stared. Some crossed to the other side of the street. A mother pulled her child closer, whispering urgently. Maya kept her chin up and her hand resting lightly on Beery's head, feeling the warmth of him, the solid reality of his presence. Her apartment was a single room with a narrow bed, a small kitchen area, and a window that overlooked the alley behind the textile mill. Not much, but it was hers. Private. Safe. Barry walked in and immediately began exploring, nose to the ground, taking in every corner and crevice. Then he settled in front of the door, positioning himself between her and the exit. "Guard dog, huh?" Maya said, setting down the bag of food she'd bought with the last of her money. "That's good. I could use the protection." Beery's tail thumped once against the floor. Before we continue, please take a second to like this video if you want more stories like this. Over the next few days, a rhythm developed. Maya would wake before dawn, and Beery would already be alert, watching her with those amber eyes. She'd talk to him while she dressed for her shift, commenting on the weather, the rent she owed, the exhaustion that had settled into her bones like frost. He'd follow her to the mill, waiting outside in the alley, curled up but never quite sleeping, and be there when her shift ended 12 hours later. On the worst days, when she stumbled out with flour caked in her hair and defeat written across her face, he'd have something waiting. A dandelion clutched carefully in his teeth, a smooth river stone, once even a bright red maple leaf he must have carried for blocks. Small things, gentle things, things that said, "I see you hurting." Then they'd walk home together through the dimming streets, and she'd cook a simple meal while he watched from his spot by the door. "I dream about him sometimes," she said one evening, 3 weeks after bringing Beery home. "Luca, I dream that I got there in time, that I pulled him away before the claws found his throat." Her voice cracked. "But I didn't. I was working a double shift because we needed the money, and he was all alone when it happened." Beery made that sound again, the one that was almost like speech, full of sympathy and something deeper. "Everyone says it was just a wolf, a wild animal, but I've seen the reports they tried to bury. The claw marks were too wide. too deliberate, and there were witnesses who swore they saw someone walking away on 2 legs, not 4. She closed her eyes. Shifters. They come into our lands and they kill our people, and there's nothing we can do about it because they're stronger, faster. We're just humans. Barry shifted, pressing closer. His warmth was a comfort she hadn't known she needed. I hate shifters, Maya whispered. I know that's wrong. I know they're not all bad. But when I think about what they took from me... She buried her fingers in his fur. I'm glad you're just a dog. I don't think I could love anything that reminded me of what I lost. Beery suddenly went very still beneath her touch, and for a moment she could have sworn she felt him trembling. When she looked down, his eyes had changed. Still amber, still gentle, but now filled with something that looked almost like grief, like her words had cut deeper than any blade could. His ears drooped slightly, and he let out a soft whine. Maya stroked his fur, guilt twisting in her chest without quite understanding why. I'm sorry, she murmured. I shouldn't dump all this on you. You're just trying to survive, same as me. Beery rested his head on her knee, patient and steady, even as something sorrowful lingered in those knowing eyes. I love you. You know that? The words slipped out unbidden, surprising her with their truth. You're all I have now, the only family I've got left. Beery's whole body shuddered. The air in the room shifted, charged with something Maya couldn't name. Then the moment passed, and he was just a dog again, pressing his nose against her palm. That night, she dreamed. In the dream, a man stood beside her bed, tall and devastatingly handsome, with dark hair that fell past his collar, sharp cheekbones, and a mouth that made her stomach flip. Broad shoulders, muscular arms, the kind of body that looked like it could pose for a statue. But it was his eyes that held her, amber, bright as firelight, impossibly familiar. He reached for her, mouth forming words she couldn't hear. His expression was desperate, pleading, like he was trying to tell her something vital. Then the dream shattered, and she woke gasping in the pre-dawn darkness. Maya pressed a hand to her racing heart, her skin flushed. Just a dream. Just her lonely brain conjuring up some fantasy because she hadn't been with anyone since well before Luca died. She shook her head, dismissing it as nothing more than exhaustion and too many romance novels borrowed from the library. Beery was still by the door, watching her. But in the shadows, for just a moment, she could have sworn his outline looked different. Taller, more angular. She blinked, and he was just a dog again. I'm losing it, she muttered, pulling the blanket over her head. The dreams continued. Every night, the same man. Sometimes he was reaching for her. Sometimes he was fighting something she couldn't see. Sometimes he just stood there looking at her with those heartbreaking amber eyes. And every morning she woke feeling like she'd forgotten something important. On the 3rd night, the dream changed. The man was closer this time, close enough that she could see the desperation in his face. His mouth moved, and though she still couldn't hear the words, she could read his lips. Please, see me. Maya woke with tears on her cheeks and no idea why. She looked toward the door where Beery always slept. But in the darkness, something was wrong. His outline seemed off, blurred at the edges, like he was caught between 2 forms. She sat up slowly, heart pounding. And then she saw it, a man's hand where a paw should be. Maya's scream caught in her throat as she scrambled, backward on the bed, pressing herself against the wall. In the pale moonlight filtering through her window, she could see him clearly. Beery, except he wasn't Barry anymore. He was shifting, his form flickering between dog and something else. A massive shoulder appeared, corded with muscle. A human back, scarred and powerful, a leg, unmistakably human, before it dissolved back into fur. "No," she breathed. "No, no, no." The shifting stopped. The dog form solidified again, and Barry, if that was even his name, looked at her with those amber eyes now filled with something that looked like apology. Maya's mind raced. Shifter. He was a shifter, and he's been in her home for weeks, sleeping by her door, listening to her secrets. "Get out," she whispered. "Get out." But he didn't move, just watched her, and she realized with a jolt that he couldn't leave, that he was trapped somehow, bound to this form in this place. The shifting began again, more violent this time. She watched in horrified fascination as his body contorted, bones cracking and reforming, fur receding to reveal skin. It looked painful. It looked wrong. And then suddenly, it was complete. A man knelt where Barry had been, naked, covered in scars, with dark hair wild around his face and those same amber eyes now set in features that were devastatingly, impossibly beautiful. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could have been carved from stone, lips pressed together in a grimace of pain or shame or both. Around his neck, that metal collar she'd never been able to remove. It glowed faintly in the moonlight, covered in symbols she didn't recognize. Maya's eyes dropped for a fraction of a second. She couldn't help it, and heat flooded her face as she registered exactly how naked he was. Completely, utterly naked. She immediately averted her eyes as she grabbed the spare blanket from the foot of her bed and tossed it toward him without looking. "Here, just cover yourself, please." "Thank you," he said, his voice rough, like he hadn't used it in years, like he was remembering how to form words with a tongue. She heard fabric rustling as he wrapped the blanket around himself. Maya kept her gaze fixed firmly on the wall, her cheeks burning. This was surreal, impossible. Her dog was a very naked man, the same man from her dreams. "You can look now," he said quietly. "I'm decent." She turned slowly, still not quite able to meet his eyes. He'd wrapped the blanket around his waist, leaving his scarred torso bare, but at least it was something. He looked just as uncomfortable as she felt, shoulders hunched slightly, one hand clutching the blanket, the other reaching up as if to run through his hair before stopping mid-gesture like he'd forgotten how hands worked. "Maya," he said, and hearing her name in that voice, the same voice from her dreams, made her shiver. "Please, let me explain." She pressed harder against the wall, wishing it would swallow her whole. "You're one of them. A shifter." "Yes. How long?" Her voice shook. "How long have you been lying to me?" "I wasn't lying." He stayed where he was, making no move to approach. "I couldn't tell you. The curse wouldn't let me. Not until—" He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. "Not until what?" "Not until you said you loved me." The words hit her like a physical blow. She thought about the past 3 weeks, everything she'd told him, every secret, every fear, every vulnerable moment she'd shared thinking he was just a dog who couldn't understand, couldn't judge, couldn't use her words against her. Heat flooded her face again. "I told you everything." "I know." His expression was anguished. "And I treasured every word. You trusted me with yourself, Maya. That was a gift I never deserved. You let me think." Her voice broke. "I said I hated shifters, and you listened and said nothing. I couldn't speak. The curse." He gestured helplessly at the collar. "It was designed to keep me silent, to keep me trapped until someone chose me despite what I was, someone who didn't know, who couldn't know, but someone who loved me anyway." Maya's mind reeled. "Why are you cursed?" He was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice came out rough, unpracticed. My name is Miles. I'm the Alpha King of the Northern Reaches. 2 years ago, my cousin Lucien wanted my throne. He hired a witch to curse me, to trap me in this form and bind me where no one from my kingdom could find me. His hands clenched into fists. The curse required someone to choose me at my most unlovable, to take me home, to care for me, to— He swallowed hard. To love me, without knowing what I was. Only then could I begin to shift back. The shelter, Maya breathed. They didn't think anyone would adopt you. Lucian's magic influenced it, made sure I'd be the last dog anyone would choose, the one most likely to be put down. His amber eyes found hers. And then you walked in. She shook, her head, trying to process it all. You've been searching for me? No. I've been searching for anyone with the capacity to see past appearances, to choose compassion over fear. His voice softened. I didn't know it would be you. Didn't know you'd be— Be what? Everything. The word hung between them, weighted with meaning she wasn't ready to examine. Your brother, Miles said quietly, and she flinched. Maya, I need to tell you something about the Northern Kingdoms. Stop. She held up a hand. I don't want to hear excuses about why your people think it's acceptable to hunt humans for sport. We don't. His voice turned hard. That's what I'm trying to explain. Lucian has been sending rogues into human territories, causing chaos, making shifters look like monsters, creating fear and division so that when he eventually reveals himself as the reasonable leader, willing to negotiate peace, he'll be seen as a savior. Miles met her gaze steadily. Your brother's death wasn't random. It was calculated, part of a larger strategy to destabilize the border territories. Maya felt something crack open in her chest. Luca was murdered by your cousin? I can't prove it, but yes, I believe so. And you want me to what? Forgive you? Help you get your throne back? She laughed, sharp and bitter. I'm human, Miles. I don't belong in some shifter kingdom, and I don't want anything to do with your world. The politics, the magic, whatever power struggles you've got going on up there. I don't need you for my kingdom. His voice was quiet. I need you because you're everything to me. Stop saying that. She was shaking now, fury and fear and something else, something treacherous and unwanted, warring inside her. You lied to me. I couldn't speak. You still lied, by omission, by letting me pour my heart out to you when you were capable of understanding every word. Tears burned behind her eyes. I told you I loved you. I know. His voice cracked. And that was the most terrifying and beautiful moment of my life. Because it broke the curse? Started to. I can shift now, between forms, but the collar still binds me. I can't leave this place, can't access my full strength or power. He looked at her with something close to desperation. Maya, Lucian's spies have been searching for me. They'll find me eventually, and when they do, that's not my problem, Miles. It is if you care what happens to me. He finally moved, rising to his feet with the same fluid grace she'd seen in his dog form. He was magnificent, all lean muscle and coiled strength, scars crisscrossing his torso like a map of battles won and lost. And I think you do. I think you meant it when you said you loved me. I loved a dog, Maya said, hating the way her voice wavered. Not a man, not a king, not a shifter who reminds me of everything I lost. I'm the same, Miles said quietly. Dog or man, I'm the same. I've always been me. But I didn't know that. I didn't— Choose that. Then choose now. He took a step closer, and she forced herself not to retreat. Look at me, Maya. I'm still the one who waited for you after every shift, who brought you dandelions in my teeth because I couldn't stand seeing you so tired and defeated, who listened when you cried and celebrated when you laughed. The form changed, but I'm still me. She looked. Despite everything screaming at her not to, she looked, and she saw the faint details of the companion she'd grown to love. The same patience in his amber eyes, the same protective stance, the same careful attention, the way he tracked her every movement like she was the most important thing in the world. Her chest tightened. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. Neither do I. A small, rueful smile crossed his face. I haven't been human in 2 years. I barely remember how to work these limbs properly. Earlier today, I tried to scratch behind my ear with my foot and nearly fell over. Despite everything, Maya felt her lips twitch. That's not funny. It's a little funny. She closed her eyes, overwhelmed. I need time to think, to process. Take all the time you need, I'm not going anywhere. When she opened her eyes again, he was shifting back, bones reforming, fur sprouting across skin. Within moments, Beery sat before her, tail thumping softly against the floor. Maya slid down the wall until she was sitting on the bed, staring at the dog who was a man who was a king, who was somehow, impossibly, hers. Now that she knew what to look for, she could see it, the way he'd always been too large, too wild, more wolf than dog. The hybrid caught between two forms, waiting for someone to break the curse that bound him. This is insane, she said to the room at large. Beery took a cautious step toward her, then another. His tail gave a tentative thump. Maya's hand lifted slightly, then fell. She looked away. He moved closer anyway, slow and careful, until his massive head was near her knee, not quite touching, just waiting. Despite everything, the fear, the confusion, the anger, her fingers found his fur. The touch was reluctant at first, uncertain, but he leaned into it with that same patient devotion he'd always shown. Maya's throat tightened. She couldn't look at him, couldn't reconcile the warmth under her palm with the man who'd hidden the truth from her. But she didn't pull away. The next few days were strange. Miles shifted between forms now, dog during the day when Maya was at work, human in the evenings when she came home. He was awkward with it, his movements stiff and uncertain, like he was relearning his own body. He tried to cook for her one night and nearly burned down her kitchen because he forgot that human hands required pot holders. He brought her wildflowers he'd caught in his teeth, then seemed surprised when she pointed out they were crushed beyond recognition. He stood too close sometimes, forgetting the boundaries that existed between humans, then backed away quickly when she tensed. But he was also charming in a way that caught her off guard, intelligent and funny, with a dry wit that emerged when he was most comfortable. He told her stories about his kingdom, the mountains that touched the sky, the forests that sang with magic, the people who shifted as easily as breathing. "What's it like?" Maya asked one evening, watching him try to tie his hair back with a leather cord. His fingers fumbled with it, clumsy after so long without practice. "Shifting?" Miles considered the question. "Like coming home. Like your body finally fitting the shape it was always meant to be." He caught her expression and paused. "That probably doesn't make sense to you." "No, it does." She took the cord from him, gesturing for him to turn around. "I used to draw before, when Luca and I were kids at the orphanage, and whenever I held charcoal, it felt like my hands knew what to do before my brain caught up, like I was born knowing how to make lines into pictures." "What happened to your drawing?" Life. She began braiding his hair, trying to ignore how intimate the gesture felt, how soft his hair was between her fingers. No time for art when you're trying to survive. Miles was quiet for a moment. Then, in my kingdom, you could draw again. We have artists, scholars, people who create beauty just because it exists. You wouldn't have to work 12-hour shifts at a mill. You could be anything you wanted. Maya's hands stilled. I can't think about that. Why not? Because it's not real. Because you're a king and I'm a mill worker, and those things don't mix. She finished the braid and stepped back, putting distance between them. And because I'm human. So I can't shift. Can't run through forests or touch the sky or whatever it is your people do. I'd be an outsider, a liability. She wrapped her arms around herself. And I can't give you shifter heirs. Your kingdom would never accept that. Miles turned to face her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. True mates can have children together. The children will be shifters. That's how the magic works. They'll have my strength in your heart, and they'll be perfect. True mates, Maya repeated slowly. Is that what we are? That's what the bond suggests. I felt it the moment you touched me through the cage bars. He took a step closer. Maya, I know this is overwhelming. I know you're scared. But I need you to understand something. Yes? I don't care that you're human. I don't care about the mill or your tiny apartment or the fact that you can barely afford food. I care about you. The woman who chose me when everyone else saw a monster, who talked to me like I mattered, who cried into my fur and let me comfort her. His voice roughened. Who said she loved me? I said that to a dog. You said it to me. Miles closed the distance between them, and Maya found herself frozen in place. You can't take it back now just because the packaging changed. A goofy, lopsided grin spread across his face, so unexpected, so earnest, that it caught her completely off guard. That's not fair. She huffed out a breath. You can't just smile at me like that and expect to win the argument. Is it working? Despite herself, her lips twitched. His grin widened for just a moment before fading into something more serious. None of this is fair. The curse wasn't fair. Your brother's death wasn't fair. But we're here anyway, and I'm asking you to take a chance. He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face with a gentleness that seemed impossible from someone so powerful. I'm still learning how to be human again, still figuring out how to use these hands for more than hunting and fighting. But Maya, I know one thing with absolute certainty. What's that? I've never felt anything like this. Never wanted anything the way I want you. Not for what you can do or what you represent, but for who you are. The woman who saves strays because she knows what it's like to be unwanted, who works herself to exhaustion to honor her brother's memory, who's brave enough to love something that terrifies her. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. I don't know if I can be what you need. You already are exactly what I want. His thumb brushed her cheekbone, and the touch sent sparks down her spine. She should step back, put distance between them before this went any further. But his palm was warm against her cheek, and she couldn't remember the last time someone had touched her like this, like she was something precious instead of just another body working the mill floor. So instead of stepping back, she found herself leaning into his touch, her body making decisions her mind wasn't ready for. Miles, she breathed. Yes? I'm still angry at you for not telling me sooner. I understand. And I'm terrified of what your world means, what loving you would cost me. Miles went very still, Maya, his voice was rough. I need you to understand something. I wasn't just a dog you took pity on. I was always me in there, a man trapped, but a man who was falling for you with every passing day. Every moment you talked to me, trusted me, let me into your life. So when I kiss you, it won't be the first time I've wanted to. It'll just be the first time I have the right form to do it. Her breath caught. Then kiss me, she whispered. He smiled, the first bright smile she'd seen from him, and it transformed his face into something luminous. I can do that. When his lips met hers, it was nothing like she'd expected. Soft and searching, like he was learning her through touch. His hands cradled her face with a reverence that made her chest ache, and when she opened her mouth beneath his, the sound he made was somewhere between a groan and a prayer. Maya's hands found his shoulders, feeling the play of muscle beneath his skin. He was warm, almost feverishly so, and solid in a way that made her feel anchored for the first time since Luca died. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, there was something almost boyish in the way Miles looked at her, uncertain, but hopeful. I'm still learning, he said roughly. If I did something wrong. Miles. She cut him off, her fingers threading through his hair. If that wasn't a good kiss, I don't know what is. His expression softened with relief, and he let out a breath that might have been a laugh. Good, because I've been thinking about doing that for weeks. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and she melted into him, into this impossible thing that shouldn't work but somehow did. They stood like that for a long time, learning each other through touch and breath and the thundering of their hearts. But outside, in the shadows of the city, something else was learning too. Lucian's spies had finally found their target. Maya woke to Beery's growling. It was deep and continuous, vibrating through the floorboards. She sat up, heart racing, and found him positioned by the door, hackles raised, teeth bared, every line of his body screaming danger. Barry? She whispered. He shifted, the transformation so fast she barely tracked it, and suddenly Miles stood there, naked and tense as a drawn bowstring. They're here, he said quietly. Stay behind me. Who's here? Lucian's hunters. Before she could respond, the door exploded inward. 3 men poured through, massive, moving with inhuman speed, eyes glowing amber in the darkness. Shifters. They didn't waste time with words, just launched themselves at Miles with coordinated precision. He met them in wolf form, the shift so seamless it looked like water flowing. His massive body collided with the first attacker with a sound like thunder, jaws finding throat before the man could complete his own transformation. Blood sprayed, hot and copper-scented, painting the walls in dark streaks, and Maya scrambled backward on the bed, pressing herself against the wall as warmth splattered across her skin. The second attacker got past Miles's guard, claws raking across his ribs with a wet tearing sound. Miles yelped, a sound that tore at Maya's heart, but he didn't go down. He spun, faster than something his size should be able to move, and caught the attacker's leg between his teeth. Bone crunched like kindling snapping. The man's scream cut off into a gurgle as Miles whipped his head sideways, and the body hit the floor with a meaty thud. The third circled, looking for an opening, looking past Miles, looking at Maya. Their eyes met, and she saw the calculation there, the realization that she was the weakness, the leverage. He lunged, but Miles was faster. He intercepted the attack midair, the 2 bodies colliding with such force that the floorboards cracked beneath them. They rolled, a blur of fur and teeth and violence, crashing into her small table and sending, dishes flying, glass shattered, wood splintered, but Miles was weakened. The collar around his neck glowed brighter, pulsing with magic that clearly drained him. His movements were slower than they should be, less coordinated. Each breath came ragged. The third attacker saw it too, saw the opening. He shifted fully, a wolf nearly as large as Miles, with fur like dried blood and eyes full of cruel intelligence. When he spoke, his voice was guttural, barely human. "The king sends his regards," he snarled, "and his promise that your human will die screaming." Miles's response was a roar that shook the walls. He threw himself at the blood-red wolf with abandon, all strategy abandoned in favor of raw fury. They met in a clash of fangs and claws, rolling across the floor, destroying what little furniture Maya owned. She pressed her hands over her mouth, trying not to scream, trying to think. There had to be something she could do, some way to help. Her eyes fell on the collar around Miles's neck, still glowing with that sickly light. The curse. It was weakening him, binding his power. To fully break the curse, Maya has to remove the collar, but doing so bonds them as mates forever. Miles's words from days ago, explaining the final seal, the choice she'd have to make. The blood-red wolf got his jaws around Miles's throat, bit down. Miles thrashed, trying to break free, but the other wolf held firm, teeth sinking deeper. Maya could hear it, the wet puncture of fangs through flesh, the desperate wheeze of Miles trying to breathe through a crushed windpipe. Maya didn't think, just moved. She threw herself off the bed, stumbling across the destroyed room, and grabbed Miles's ruff. Her fingers found the collar beneath his fur, hot to the touch, burning with magic that seared into her palms like a brand. The smell of her own flesh cooking made her gag, but she didn't let go. "Maya, no," Miles's voice in her head, desperate and pleading. "You don't have to." She pulled. The collar resisted, fighting her. Magic sparked against her palms, white-hot lightning that burrowed into bone. She screamed, couldn't help it. The pain was blinding, all-consuming, like holding molten iron in her bare hands. But she didn't let go. Couldn't let go. Not when he was dying right in front of her. "I choose you," she gasped out. "Both of you. The wolf and the man. I choose you, Miles." The collar shattered. Magic exploded outward, a shockwave that threw the blood-red wolf across the room like a rag doll and sent Maya stumbling backward. Light poured from Miles, golden and blinding, and his form shifted. Not to human, not to the wolf she knew. Something bigger. Something primal and ancient and utterly terrifying. A wolf the size of a horse, with fur like shadow and eyes like captured stars. Power radiated from him in waves that made the air shimmer, made her teeth ache, made the windows rattle in their frames. She understood now, viscerally, what an alpha king meant in the shifter world. The blood-red wolf took one look at him and ran. Miles, this new, devastating version of Miles, lunged after him, caught him before he made it 3 steps. There was a brief, brutal struggle, then an ominous silence. Miles stood over the body, breathing hard. The other 2 attackers were already dead, their bodies cooling on her ruined floor. Slowly, he turned to face her. Maya's breath caught. This form was magnificent and terrible, all raw power and predatory grace. Nothing like the manageable dog she'd grown comfortable with. But his eyes, those amber eyes were still his, still held the same gentleness, the same careful attention, still saw her as the most important thing in the world. He shifted back, to human this time, and she saw the exact moment the reality hit him, saw his face transform with horror as he took in the destruction, the bodies. Maya pressed against the wall, her hands blistered and bleeding from the collar's magic. "Maya." He stumbled toward her, and she saw he was hurt. Claw marks across his ribs, a bite wound on his shoulder that leaked blood down his chest. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to see. You're hurt, she interrupted, reaching for him despite the fear still singing in her veins. I'm all right. I heal fast. He caught her hands gently, carefully, examining the burns on her palms. But the collar hurt you. I'm okay. And she was. The burns were already fading, angry red welts smoothing to pink, deflating like the magic that had lost its grip on Miles. You broke the curse. His voice was rough with emotion. You didn't have to do that. I told you to run. And leave you to die? Maya shook her head. Not a chance. But the bond is permanent now. You're tied to me, to my life, my lifespan, my kingdom, everything that comes with being my mate. Miles searched her face desperately. Maya, you can't take it back. What's done is done. I know. Do you? He pulled her, closer, and she could feel him trembling. It means you'll live as long as I do. Centuries, maybe. It means our children will be shifters, powerful and dangerous. It means leaving your human life behind. Your job, your home, everything familiar. His hands framed her face. It means stepping into a world that killed your brother, that took everything from you. Maya thought about Luca, about the promise they'd made to each other, to never let the other be alone. She'd broken that promise when he died, left him to face the darkness by himself. But maybe she could honor it now, by choosing life, by choosing love, even when it terrified her. I'm scared, she admitted. I'm so scared of what this means, of losing myself in your world. Then I'll make sure you don't. I'll remind you every day who you are, what you're worth. Miles pressed his forehead to hers. Maya, I will spend the rest of my very long life making sure you never regret this choice. Promise? On my crown, on my life, on everything I am. Miles glanced at the bodies, his expression hardening. Lucian knows where I am now. He'll send more hunters, an army, if necessary. He met her eyes, and something shifted in his expression, determination mixed with hope. I need to go back, reclaim my throne, end this. He paused, then stepped closer, cupping her face with those careful hands. Come with me, Maya. Her stomach dropped. Miles, I know my world is foreign, and nothing like the life you've built here. His thumb traced her cheekbone, achingly gentle. But you broke a curse that was supposed to be unbreakable. You faced down killers for me. You chose me when no one else would. His voice softened. Let me choose you back, every day, for the rest of our lives. I don't know anything about shifter politics or, you know, about loyalty, about protecting the ones you love even when it costs you everything. That's all I need. The rest we'll figure out together. He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. Please. I don't want to do this without you. Maya's breath caught. She thought of her empty apartment, her mill shifts, the loneliness that had been eating her alive. Then she thought of amber eyes and dandelions clutched in careful teeth, and the way he looked at her like she was the center of his universe. Okay, she whispered. Together. Pride and love transformed his face. He kissed her then. His mouth claimed hers with a hunger that stole her breath, one hand fisting in her hair while the other pulled her flush against him. The curse was broken. He was whole again, powerful again, and she could feel it in the way he kissed her, deeper, more demanding, like he'd been holding back before and finally didn't have to. Heat flooded through her as his teeth caught her bottom lip, as a growl rumbled low in his chest that was pure want. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard, and his eyes had gone molten gold. Get dressed. Pack what you can carry. We leave in 10 minutes. Where are we going? His smile turned sharp, predatory. Home, to remind my cousin exactly who's king. They fled the city before dawn. Miles carried what little Maya owned in a pack across his shoulders. Human now, dressed in clothes he'd borrowed from a neighbor's wash line. They moved through the streets like ghosts, keeping to shadows, avoiding the main roads. At the city's edge, he shifted. Maya had seen his wolf form multiple times now, but this new version, powerful and massive, still stole her breath. He lowered himself to the ground, patient, and she understood what he wanted. You want me to ride you? His tail wagged once. Yes. I've never ridden anything in my life. He made a sound that might have been amusement, and she felt it through the bond, that new connection humming between them like a plucked string. Trust me. Maya climbed onto his back, fingers tangling in his thick fur. The moment she settled, he rose smoothly, adjusting his gait to accommodate her weight. Then he ran. The world blurred into streaks of color and shadow. Trees whipped past, the ground disappearing beneath them as Miles moved faster than any horse she'd ever seen. Wind tore at her hair, her clothes, and she pressed herself against his back, holding on for dear life. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. It was freedom. They traveled for 3 days, stopping only when Maya needed rest. Miles hunted for food, brought her water from streams, curled around her at night to keep her warm. On the second evening, when exhaustion had her fighting back tears, he nudged a small cluster of wildflowers into her lap, crumpled and a little crushed, but carefully chosen, just like he used to do after her long shifts at the mill. She laughed through the tightness in her throat, and he tucked one behind her ear. Through it all, she felt the bond strengthening, learning the shape of his thoughts, his emotions, the way his presence settled into her bones like it had always belonged there. On the third evening, they crested a ridge and Maya saw it, the northern reaches, mountains that pierced the sky, their peaks lost in clouds, forests that stretched endlessly, ancient and wild and singing with magic, and nestled in the valley below, a city of stone and timber that seemed to grow from the landscape itself. It's beautiful, Maya breathed. Miles shifted beside her, human again. It's home. He took her hand, threading their fingers together. Our home, if you'll have it. She looked at him. This man who'd waited outside the mill in the cold, who'd let her cry into his fur on the nights when the loneliness felt like drowning, who looked at her now like she was the reason he'd survived 2 years in hell. What happens when we get there? She asked. I challenge Lucian, reclaim my throne. His jaw tightened. And I make him pay for every life he's taken, every person he's hurt, including your brother. Will you win? Miles was quiet for a moment. I don't know. He's had 2 years to consolidate power, to build alliances. I've been trapped as a dog. His hand squeezed hers. But I have something he doesn't. What's that? You. Someone who chose me when I had nothing. Someone who loved me at my weakest. He turned to face her fully. You gave me a reason to be strong again. Someone worth fighting for. Maya's throat tightened. No pressure or anything. You don't have to do anything but stay safe, Maya. Let me handle Lucian. Not a chance. I didn't break a magic collar and ride a wolf for 3 days just to sit on the sidelines. She met his eyes steadily. I'm your mate. That means something, right? In your world? It means everything. Then let me be part of this. Let me help you. Miles studied her for a long moment. Then he pulled her close, kissing her with a tenderness that made her chest ache. You're already helping. Just by being here. By choosing this. They descended into the valley as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. The city gates were guarded, but the moment the sentries saw Miles, they fell to their knees. "My king," one breathed. "You're alive." "I am." Miles's voice carried authority now, the weight of his station settling over him like a cloak. "Where is Lucian?" "The palace, my lord. He's been ruling in your absence." "Not for much longer." Miles looked at Maya, and she saw the apex predator lurking beneath his skin. "Take us to him." They were escorted through streets lined with people who emerged from their homes to stare. Whispers followed in their wake. "The king has returned. He's alive. Who is the human girl?" Maya kept her chin up, kept her hand in Miles's, and tried not to feel like an imposter. The palace was carved into the mountainside itself, all soaring arches and windows that caught the dying light. Inside, it smelled like pine and wood smoke and something wild she couldn't name. And in the throne room, sitting on a chair that didn't belong to him, was Lucian. He looked like Miles. Same dark hair, same sharp features. But where Miles's eyes held warmth, Lucian's were cold, calculating. And when they landed on Maya, they filled with something that made her skin crawl. "Cousin," Lucian said, not bothering to stand. "I heard rumors you'd survived. I should have sent better hunters." "You should have," Miles agreed. His voice was deadly calm. "You should have done a lot of things differently." "And who's this?" Lucian's gaze raked over Maya. "Your human pet?" Maya felt Miles tense beside her, felt rage flooding through the bond. She squeezed his hand. "Steady." "She's my mate," Miles said quietly, "and you will show her respect." Lucian laughed. "A human mate. You're even weaker than when I last saw you. The kingdom will never accept it." "Then they'll learn otherwise." Miles took a step forward. "I'm here to reclaim my throne, Lucian. You can surrender it peacefully, or I can take it from you. Your choice." "You think you can beat me?" Lucian stood, and power radiated from him. "I've had 2 years to grow stronger, to build alliances. You've been playing house pet to a mill worker." "Careful," Miles said softly. "That mill worker is worth more than you'll ever be." "Prove it." Lucian's smile turned cruel. "Fight me. Here, now. Winner takes the throne, and the human girl." "She's not a prize." "Isn't she?" Lucian's eyes found Maya again. "I wonder if she knows what being a queen means. The court politics, the assassination attempts, the constant threat of war." He tisked. "She'll be dead within a year." Maya stepped forward before Miles could stop her. "I survived growing up an orphan, survived losing my brother, survived loving a man trapped in a curse you created." She met Lucian's gaze without flinching. "I think I can handle your court." Something flickered in Lucian's expression. Surprise, maybe, or amusement. Then it was gone, replaced by cold fury. "So be it." He began to shift, bones cracking and reforming. "Let's see if your love is worth dying for." Miles shifted too, that massive form, all shadow and starlight, and the 2 wolves circled each other in the throne room. The air itself seemed to thicken with their power. The fight, when it came, was brutal. Lucian struck first, going for Miles's throat with a snarl that rattled the windows. Miles dodged, countered with a swipe that opened Lucian's shoulder to the bone. Blood sprayed across marble floors in spurts, the copper stench of it filling the air. They crashed together like thunder, a tangle of teeth and claws and pure violence. The impact shook the floor. Lucian was fast, vicious, going for weak points with surgical precision, ribs, tendons, eyes. But Miles was stronger, his restored power evident in every movement, every bone-crushing bite. They broke apart, panting, blood dripping from a dozen wounds. Circling again. Lucian's eyes found Maya. She saw his intention a heartbeat before he moved, saw the calculation, the cruelty. He lunged, not at Miles, but at her. Miles was faster. He intercepted Lucian mid-leap, jaws closing around his cousin's throat with a crunch that made her stomach turn. They hit the ground hard enough to crack marble, rolling, destroying furniture and sending guards scrambling. Maya tasted dust and blood in the air, but Lucian twisted free with a desperate wrench, fur tearing, and his claws raked across Miles's face. 4 deep furrows opened from eye to jaw. Blood poured from the wounds, blinding him, and Miles staggered. Lucian pressed his advantage, driving Miles back with savage bites and calculated strikes, toward the balcony, toward the drop beyond. Maya's heart stopped. Through the bond, she felt Miles's pain like it was her own, white-hot and overwhelming. Felt his exhaustion, the way his muscles screamed. Felt him pushing past his limits, refusing to go down, refusing to leave. Her. Lucian pressed his advantage, driving Miles back with savage bites and calculated strikes toward the balcony, toward the drop beyond. Maya's heart stopped. Through the bond, she felt Miles's pain like it was her own, white-hot and overwhelming. Felt his exhaustion, the way his muscles screamed. Felt him pushing past his limits, refusing to go down, refusing to leave her. Lucian's jaws found Miles's leg, bit down with a wet crunch. Bone cracked. Miles went down with a yelp that tore through Maya's chest, and she felt his leg give out through the bond, felt the sharp, bright agony of it. No! She ran forward, not thinking, just reacting. Lucian's head snapped toward her, muzzle dripping red. His teeth were bared, eyes wild with bloodlust. He released Miles and turned, stalking toward her with predatory intent, each step deliberate. Miles tried to rise, but couldn't. The shattered leg buckled beneath him, and he collapsed with a whimper that made something in Maya's chest crack, open. Maya backed away, hands raised, feeling the wall behind her. Nowhere left to go. Please, don't do this. Your mate is weak, Lucian growled, his voice distorted by the wolf form. He chose sentiment over strength, chose you over his kingdom. He chose love over power, Maya shot back. That's not weakness. It is in our world. He lunged, but not before Miles moved. Despite the broken leg, despite the blood loss, despite everything, he threw himself between them. Through the bond, Maya felt it, the surge of desperate primal need that overrode pain, overrode exhaustion, overrode every physical limitation. Protect her. Protect her. Protect her. The mantra pounded through him like a second heartbeat, and his body obeyed even when it shouldn't have been able to. His massive body collided with Lucian's mid-leap, and they rolled across the throne room floor in a blur of fur and violence. Marble cracked beneath them. Blood painted the floor in smears. When they separated, Miles had Lucian pinned, one massive paw on his cousin's chest, the broken leg trembling but holding through sheer force of will. His jaws closed around Lucian's throat, not biting, not yet, just holding, waiting. Lucian thrashed, trying to break free, claws scrabbling against Miles's chest and opening new wounds. But Miles's grip was iron, unbreakable. Through the bond, Maya felt Miles's rage, felt his desire for vengeance, for justice, for ending this once and for all. Felt him looking at her, asking. She could feel it, the question hanging between them. Kill him or show mercy? Maya thought about Luca, about all the lives Lucian had destroyed, all the pain he'd caused. Thought about justice and revenge and whether they were the same thing. Don't become him, she said quietly. Don't let him turn you into something you're not. Miles held Lucian for one more heartbeat. 2. Then he released him, stepping back. Lucian scrambled away, shifting back to human. His throat was bleeding, bruised where Miles's teeth had pressed. "You're letting me live?" "I'm exiling you," Miles said, his voice rough. "You leave these lands tonight." Lucian's smile crept back, sharp and mocking. "And I'm stripping you of your shift," Miles continued. "My decree binds it. You'll never take that form again. Never hunt, never attack, never threaten anyone as a beast." Lucian froze. The color drained from his face. "You can't." "I can," Miles said. "And it's done. If you ever return, if you ever threaten my mate or my kingdom again, I won't show mercy a second time." Lucian laughed, bitter, disbelieving. "You really have grown soft." "I've grown up." Miles shifted back to human, wincing at the pain in his leg. Lucian looked between them, at Miles, bleeding and exhausted but victorious, and at Maya, standing beside him with her chin raised. Then he spat on the floor and walked out. The throne room erupted in whispers. Miles swayed, and Maya was there immediately, supporting his weight. "You need a healer." "I need you." He pulled her close, pressing his face against her hair. "Are you hurt? Did he touch you?" "I'm okay. You're the one who's bleeding everywhere." "I heal fast, remember?" "Not from a broken leg, you don't." She looked around the room, at all the watching faces. "Someone get a healer." They scrambled to obey, and Maya realized with a jolt that they were listening to her, accepting her authority, accepting her as queen. The thought was terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. Miles's leg healed over the next week, bones knitting back together with the accelerated speed of shifter biology. Maya stayed by his side, learning the rhythms of palace life, meeting the court members who'd remained loyal during Lucian's rule. Some accepted her immediately. Others watched her with suspicion, this human who'd somehow captured their king's heart. But Maya didn't need their approval. She had Miles's, and slowly she was earning their respect. On the 8th day, Miles found her in the gardens. She was drawing, charcoal on parchment, her hands finally steady enough to create again. The mountains, rendered in shades of gray and black, were taking shape under her fingers. "You drew," Miles said, settling beside her on the bench. "You said I could. In your kingdom. Our kingdom." He took her hand, the one not covered in charcoal dust. "Maya, there's something we need to discuss." Her heart skipped. That sounds ominous. Not ominous, just important. He turned her to face him. "You're my mate, my queen. But you're also human, and there are implications. The lifespan thing, you mentioned that." "Yes. The bond extends your life to match mine. Centuries, probably." His thumb brushed over her knuckles. "But there's more. Children." "Right. Shifter children. Are you ready for that? For raising kids who can turn into wolves? Who'll have abilities you don't?" He searched her face. "I need to know you understand what that means." Maya thought about it carefully. "Will they be safe? I'll protect them with my life. Will they be loved? Endlessly. Then yes, I'm ready." She smiled, terrified, but ready. Miles kissed her, soft and reverent and full of promise. When he pulled back, his eyes were suspiciously bright. "What?" Maya asked. "Nothing, just thank you for choosing this, for choosing me. Best decision I ever made. Even better than adopting a stray from the shelter." She pretended to consider. "That's a close second." He laughed, pulling her close. They sat like that for a long time, watching the sun set over the mountains, the future stretching before them like uncharted territory. 6 months later, Maya stood in the same throne room where Miles had fought Lucian, wearing a dress of midnight blue that made her eyes shine. The entire court had gathered, hundreds of faces, some familiar now, some still strange, but she only had eyes for Miles. He stood at the altar in formal leathers, his dark hair pulled back, amber eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her knees weak. When she reached him, he took her hands with a gentleness that still surprised her after all this time. The ceremony was simple, traditional vows, spoken in the old language, binding them not just as mates but as king and queen. When the officiant declared them joined, Miles kissed her with such tenderness that the crowd cheered. "My queen," he whispered against her lips. "My king," she whispered back. The celebration lasted until dawn. There was music and dancing and toasts that grew increasingly ridiculous as the wine flowed. Maya danced with Miles, with court members who'd become friends, with children who could shift between forms as easily as breathing. And later, when they finally escaped to their chambers, Miles could barely get the door closed before he was on her. He breathed against her neck, his hands already working at the laces of her dress. "Months of watching you, wanting you, not being able to touch you like this." Maya's breath caught as he lifted her, her legs wrapping around his waist. He was strong, stronger than any human man, holding her weight effortlessly as he carried her to the bed. "Miles, tell me if it's too much," he said, laying her down with a gentleness that contradicted the hunger blazing in his amber eyes. "Shifters we're more intense. Stamina. Strength. I don't want to hurt you." "You won't." She pulled him down to her, and the kiss was desperate, claiming. His hands were everywhere, reverent but possessive, mapping every curve like he was memorizing something he'd die without. When he finally entered her, Maya gasped at the sensation. He was big, powerful, and the way he moved, controlled but barely leashed, made her understand exactly what it meant to be with someone who was more than human. He set a pace that would have exhausted anyone else, but his stamina seemed endless, driving her to the edge again and again until she was shaking beneath him. "Maya," he whispered against her throat, and she felt his teeth, that shifter instinct to mark what was his. "You're mine. Say it." "Yours," she gasped, arching into him. "Always yours." He made a sound that was almost a growl, and the intensity increased until she shattered around him with a cry. He followed moments later, his whole body shuddering, her name a prayer on his lips. Afterward, he held her close, still breathing hard, his heart thundering beneath her palm. "I love you," he said, pressing kisses to her hair, her temple, anywhere he could reach. "My brave, impossible Maya. I'll never get enough of you." "I love you too. Both of you. The wolf and the man." She traced the scars on his chest. "They're the same." "They are." He caught her hand, brought it to his lips. "And they're both completely yours." They fell asleep tangled together, the bond humming between them, warm and constant, and home. 3 months after that, Maya woke feeling different, nauseous, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. Miles knew before she did. "You're pregnant," he said, wonder and terror warring in his expression. "How do you know?" "I can smell it, the change in your scent." He pressed a hand to her still flat stomach. "There's a life in there, our child." Maya covered his hand with hers. "Are you happy?" "Terrified," he admitted. "But yes, so happy I can barely breathe." The pregnancy was harder than she'd expected. Carrying a shifter child took a toll on her human body, left her weak and sick and more dependent on Miles than she liked. But he was there. Every moment, every difficulty, every fear. He held her when she cried, brought her food she could stomach, stayed up with her through the long nights when the baby kicked with inhuman strength. "It's like there's a wolf cub trying to claw its way out," she groaned one evening. Miles pressed a kiss to her swollen belly. "Probably accurate. That's not comforting. Sorry." He looked up at her, and the love in his eyes made her chest ache. "You're incredible, you know that? Growing our child, dealing with court politics, being a queen when you never asked for any of this." "I asked for you," Maya said quietly. "Everything else just came with the package." When the labor started, it was brutal. Shifter births were faster than human ones, but infinitely more painful. Maya screamed through contractions that felt like her body was tearing apart, while Miles held her hand and whispered encouragement. "You can do this. You're the strongest person I know. Just a little longer." And finally, after hours that felt like years, their daughter was born. She came into the world crying, loud and furious and absolutely perfect. Dark hair like Miles, but Maya's eyes. Human in form, but with that shimmer beneath her skin that suggested the wolf waiting inside. Miles held her with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face. "She's beautiful. Maya, she's perfect. Let me see her." He placed the baby in her arms, and Maya felt something inside her settle, click into place. This was her daughter, her family, her future. "What should we name her?" Miles asked. Maya thought about Luca, about the promise they'd made to never be alone, about how she'd kept that promise by building this new life, this new family. "Lucia," she said, "after my brother?" Miles pressed a kiss to her temple. "It's perfect." The years that followed were chaotic and beautiful, and everything Maya had never dared dream of. Lucia grew fast, shifting for the first time at 3 years old and giving them both heart attacks. She was followed by a son 2 years later, quiet where Lucia was wild, thoughtful where she was impulsive. Maya learned to navigate court politics, to balance being a queen with being herself. She opened schools for orphans, started programs to help humans and shifters coexist peacefully. Slowly, the kingdom accepted her, not just as Miles's choice, but as their own. And through it all, Miles was there. Her partner, her mate, her home. They still fought, of course, still had moments where the differences between them, human and shifter, mill worker and king, created friction. But they always came back together, the bond between them stronger than any disagreement. 20 years after that first meeting in the shelter, Maya stood in the gardens watching Lucia teach her younger brother how to shift properly. "You have to feel it," Lucia said, her voice patient, "like you're stepping into a different skin." The boy concentrated, and slowly his form began to blur. Shift. Within moments, a small wolf stood where he'd been, tail wagging with pride. "Well done!" Lucia shifted too, and the two wolves tumbled together across the grass. Miles appeared beside Maya, slipping an arm around her waist. "She's good with him. She's good at everything. Gets that from you." "She gets her stubbornness from you." Maya laughed. "Fair enough." They stood in comfortable silence, watching their children play. Maya's hair had a few strands of silver now, but otherwise, she looked much as she had that day in the shelter. The bond had slowed her aging, would keep her young and vital for centuries to come. It was still strange sometimes, still overwhelming, but she wouldn't trade it. "Do you ever regret it?" Miles asked quietly. "Giving up your human life for this?" Maya turned to face him fully. "Never. Not once. Even when court politics drive you crazy?" "Even then." She cupped his face, feeling the familiar shape of him beneath her palms. "You gave me a family, Miles. A purpose. A home. That's worth any sacrifice. He kissed her softly. You saved me, Maya. In every way a person can be saved. We saved each other. From across the garden, Lucia called out, Stop being gross. We can see you. They broke apart laughing, and Miles shifted, that massive, wolf form she'd learned to love just as much as the man. He bounded toward their children, playful and joyful, and Maya watched with her heart full to bursting. This was her life now, not the one she'd planned, not the one she'd expected, but the one she'd chosen, the one she'd fought for. And it had all started with one choice in a shelter, one moment of compassion, one dog with amber eyes who'd been waiting for someone exactly like her. Someone brave enough to love a monster. Someone kind enough to see past the fur and fangs to the heart underneath. Someone who understood, better than anyone, what it meant to be lost and to be found again. Can you rate this story from 1 to 10? Let's meet in the comments. I love hearing your thoughts, and if you'd like to support me, please subscribe. It's free, and it helps more people hear these stories.